When we step inside a historic cathedral today, our eyes are naturally drawn upward. We see sunlight pouring through stained glass, soaring vaulted ceilings, and an atmosphere built entirely around purity and heavenly grace. But if you stood in this exact spot centuries ago, your attention wouldn't be on the vaulted ceilings above you. You'd be looking straight down. Those heavy stone and wooden planks are actually the thin roofs of incredibly shallow, overcrowded mass graves. Today, we use the phrase stinking rich as a metaphor for extreme wealth. For the medieval elite, however, that stench was a literal physical reality. The more money a family had, the closer they were buried to the congregation, and the more their decay permeated the church. Our modern catchphrase for wealth was born at this intersection of theology and biology, a time when buying a place in heaven created a localized nightmare for the living. Ancient Roman public health laws required the dead to be buried well outside city walls to keep foul air away from the living. Early Christians broke this tradition, hiding their martyrs in secret catacombs directly beneath their places of worship to keep their relics close. This practice evolved into a powerful doctrine called ad sanctos. This animated spatial chart shows the medieval church's map of spiritual protection, an aura of holy grace radiating from the altar, securing salvation. This turned the floor into prime real estate, dividing the sanctuary into color-coded price tiers, with costs rising closer to the altar. The chancel, the area immediately in front of the altar, was reserved for royalty and high-ranking clergy. The nave, the main public hall, was bought up by wealthy merchants who could afford the spiritual protection of the building. Physical proof of this market remains today. These intricately carved stone slabs blanket the floors of historic cathedrals, marking the exact spots where families bought their way into the sanctuary. The medieval church floor became a physical map of social class. Even in death, the elite believed their wealth could secure a better position before God. This system faced a severe physical limitation: space. Because churches needed to accommodate as many paying burials as possible, graves were shockingly shallow, with coffins often resting only 12 to 18 inches below the floorboards. These bodies were placed in simple wooden boxes that were not airtight. As the remains decomposed, they released gases and fluids that filtered directly through the cracks in the wooden floorboards above. In the summer, unventilated cathedrals trapped the heat, accelerating the rot and pushing concentrated corpse gases into the main hall. During Sunday services, the wealthiest parishioners sat in their expensive pews directly above their own rotting ancestors. The resulting stench was often unbearable. To endure the service, worshippers carried nosegays, bundles of strong-smelling herbs, to hold against their faces. The heavy use of incense in these churches was often a practical necessity to mask the smell of the decomposing elite. The clergy faced the greatest risk, standing in the chancel, the most expensive and crowded burial zone. Historical records frequently mention priests passing out from the toxic fumes rising from the floor. The obsessive pursuit of a holy afterlife had inadvertently engineered a biological hazard for the living congregation. By the Victorian era, urban populations had exploded. Rampant diseases like cholera collided with church floors that were filled to their absolute maximum capacity. To solve the space crisis, the church began digging up older bodies once their leases expired. These bones were moved into charnel houses, where they were stacked by the thousands as structural elements and decoration. The ultra-wealthy tried to avoid this fate by using heavy, sealed lead coffins. However, the airtight metal trapped the expanding decomposition gases inside. As the internal pressure mounted, these lead coffins would occasionally detonate, splintering the floorboards above and releasing a concentrated biohazard into the church. The crisis reached its peak at London's Enon Chapel. For years, 12,000 bodies rotted in a tiny cellar directly beneath a children's Sunday school, causing the building to swarm with corpse flies and making the children upstairs fall ill. Unchecked vanity and the burial trade triggered a public health crisis that could no longer be ignored. In 1843, Edwin Chadwick published a report that changed everything. He provided scientific evidence that the rotting dead in city centers were poisoning the air and water, killing the living. Public outrage forced the British Parliament to pass the Burial Acts of the 1850s. This legislation strictly banned indoor city burials, ending a 1,000-year-old tradition in favor of public safety. This led to the birth of the garden cemetery. The dead were moved to open-air landscapes outside the city, finally separating the place of worship from the site of decay. For the elite who paid fortunes to be remembered forever, the result is a massive historical irony. Because they bought plots in the highest traffic areas of the church, millions of footsteps over the centuries have physically erased their names. The very people they wanted to impress have walked their names into oblivion. The medieval elite spent fortunes to buy proximity to the altar, but by placing themselves directly under the feet of the living, they guaranteed their own erasure, trading their family names for a century of foul air and eventual anonymity.